Hey, folks. Thought I'd do a little talk on something that I think a lot of people do not even consider when they look at things or they think about things. And I'm even talking about people who I served with from different forces. I know I did a show about this, but I got to get even more refined now. There's a difference between civil and military policing. First off, civil police, federal agents, agents of a state, county sheriff's deputies, also, if you want to go into it, police officers. Well, there's a reason why, there's a reason why military police are not called officers. They're a military policeman or a military policewoman. The reason for that is because an officer is actually an O grade, an officer grade. There's also warrant officers. That's a whole different thing. That's when you're calling them Mr. Okay, but I'm not going to quibble with the little terminologies. That's not what this is about. The important part about this, the even more important thing about this, you'll hear Air Force people who are security police. I went through their school down at Lackland Air Force Base. I know completely what they are. Even their LEOs. They're either security police at that time in the 80s, or they were security services. That's what it was called. I think it's changed now. Just like military police when I was in was 95 series, and now it's 31 series. Things change. But the job doesn't. That's the key. And when I blend this in there, you're going to understand exactly what I'm talking about. Right now you might be thinking I'm nuts, but I'm defining things. And the only way I can do it is by defining it. Because there's an issue that I'm seeing lines blurred. A Navy person. You have Master at Arms, you have Security Specialist, and you also have Shore Patrol. None of them are the same. You also have, and this is easy to define, you also have Air Force men who are security police or security specialists. I think they now call themselves security forces. They've combined the two. SF, right? No, they're not special forces, security forces. Just being very clear, but they're not military policemen, and yet they will insist, in common parlance, I've seen this many times, they're military policemen in the Army or the Air Force. No, they're not. I've been into 2 military police forces that are actually military police. The Army, where the terminology and the authority under Title 10 USC is given, of course, that's Department of Defense. These are facts. I just want to, and that's where they get their authority too. Don't misread me. I know what I'm talking about. But they get their authority the same place the military police does. The Marine Corps has a couple different things that are different because they come from the sea normally. Trust me, as a military policeman, you have to know the law of land warfare, USC codes that are pertinent to what you're doing. If you're working at a port, you better know 19 USC, which is all the customs stuff. If you're also working and doing EPW, law of land warfare, and if you're in a combat zone, law of land warfare, and the UCMJ, that is a commonality throughout all forces. You have to know it to be able to write about it. First difference I'm going to give you. Notice I said there is a difference with Army and Marine. You think the guys that went into the Battle of the Bulge, or not the Battle of the Bulge, the landing on the beaches in France, you think they didn't have to know some things about maritime security, different things like that? The military policemen that went in did have to know this stuff because they set up a mobile port. These are just things that are normal and natural. Now, the quandary that you're going to find is that a military policeman also deals with EPW, straggler control. It deals with refugee control. And you have to know the differences between all those things. This is bland. I know I'm trying to sex it up for you folks so you can actually have fun with it. But there is a delineage that unless an Air Force base or a Navy base that's a port, because of course naval ships or their aircraft are set up on a base like that. But the reality is this. Military policemen have a defined thing. And if you're not doing that thing, you're not a military policeman or woman or officer. That's why they changed the names, but they just broad brush this as common parlance, and it's not. Now that I've established a basis, here's the thing that you need to be aware of. I think it's because we've changed our courts into more of a court of admiralty, indicative by the yellow fringe on the flag in that court. There's starting to be lines blurred between military policing and civil policing. As I stated earlier, civil policing, federal, state, local, county. They have their auspices politically and everything else given to them by the small s state. Military policing is unlike, except for DCIS, Defense Criminal Investigation Service, a couple other little agencies within DOD. There's 96 different federal agencies, by the way. They'll have 6C, which is federal agencies. Okay, that's their status they run with. But DCIS is actually the OIG, Office of Inspector General, for DOD. The complete oversight. They are the FBI for DOD. The FBI really can't broach into DOD unless they get permission, unless some OIG is corrupt. But OIG also has their own Office of Professional Responsibility. All right, now I've handled that. Military policing is in combat. No civilian cop, even the military vets, are ever going to, and we're including civilian DOD cops, are never, unless they actually get assigned to a war zone, going to live in austere environments, out of a tent, out of a chew, any of these ways people live overseas in war zones. That's a fact. It's just not going to happen. They're going to live somewhere like at an embassy, a hotel. They're going to have a nice car. They're going to roll around. Military police are going to live out of a tent, out of a chew, and they're going to rock ops that the Air Force doesn't do, neither does the Navy. One of them is route reconnaissance. It's what you do. And, you know, even when I was in the Marine Corps, there were arguments I had with people that weren't former Army. We had like 6 former Army MPs. And they were trying to convince us that a route reconnaissance can be done on foot when a route reconnaissance has to be done at a maximum 45 minutes before the convoy comes through. Route reconnaissance is where you go out, check out the road, mines, all this stuff. MP also, we say, is multi-purpose. We have to have a skill set that's larger than most soldiers. And that's a fact. Or Marines. NBC, be one of them. Intel's another one. The other one that's a major one is that you are looking for any IEDs, anything like that, okay? So you're checking out that route, and you're relaying it, usually in 3-man teams back in the 80s and 90s, even into the 2000s. Now that I've been very clear on the differences of duties, there are times when you'll be put in a TCP, traffic control point, where you're out there all by yourself or maybe with a team of 3 and you're directing traffic. That's all you're doing. I was put out at 29 Palms as a Marine on a TCP for 5 days. They gave me a box of MREs and a 5-gallon jug for water. And that was at the intersection of Camp Wilson and Chocolate Chip Mountain. And right by where ordnance was being dropped. Artillery range impact area. And that's how I lived, right there. There's a picture of it. It's a fact. That's what happened. Now, these are the kind of things that are indicative of that. Now, civil policing, here's the scary part, have been adopting, and have been for years. Don't think this is new. This has been since the 70s when SWAT, Special Weapons and Tactics teams, were first started. Now we call them SRT, Special Reactionary Teams. That's when it first started, was in the 70s. They were blending military policing into civil when that, I understand the need for it at times. But once you have something, you have to use it. The easiest way I can show you a gross abuse of it is what, and I don't care about your politics. I'm not trying to start anything. I'm saying the grossest abuse I've seen of late was what they did with Roger Stone, a 67-year-old man that anybody's threat nexus or threat analysis would say, yeah, we already know he doesn't. They know if you own guns or not because you sign your little 31 for ATF Form 31. You think that doesn't go anywhere? When you call in to say, can I have that gun? You think they don't know what you own? Oh, they do. See, this is the thing that the American people really need to rev up on, and they should be pushing back on. And for some reason, I don't know if it's misinformation. I think a lot of it is. Or just, I don't care. Because I don't think a lot of people care. Now, with what happened on the border, where Trump said, okay, we're going to have a national emergency on the border. Cool. He can do that. He can federalize troops, too. And the border is one of those things that we can, as military policemen, control. As a matter of fact, the military, that's one of their jobs. Keep the border safe. You're seeing what they're doing with that now. Think about it, folks. Now you have lawyers involved. Lawyers shouldn't be involved in this at all because that is a duly, and if you doubt me, if you're on the liberal side, just think back to Alabama when you had the National Guard and the state police trying to keep little black women or little black girls and little black boys from going to a school, and all it took was a lift of a phone, a call, and they federalized the National Guard. And they turned their guns on the state police. That's a fact. So you have to understand, this is settled law. All this is settled law. All this is trying to delay getting assets moved to enhance our border. Think why that is. Who's trying to do it? That's all I'm going to say on that. That's also why the differences are being blurred. This is just a quick primer. I really want input on my pages. You guys like, comment, and share. Tell me if you want more of it. Tell me if you don't on everything I post. Because I want to give you what you need and what you want to deep dive into some of this stuff. I was deep diving, but I was getting hour and a half, 2 hour things where I'm just running my suck. I'm not going to do that to you guys anymore. I want to know what you want to know more of. But the thing is, Americans should care on this because it's actually going to have an effect upon you. And in one way or the other, you're either going to agree with it or not. And I understand what you're saying when you might disagree, but there is something called authority. And while we don't have kings, here's another funny thing. While we don't have kings, we have a president, but he does have certain authorities, almost like king's rule, okay, where he can veto something. It's more parliamentary than that, but he can pardon. So these things are real, and he can pardon civilly and militarily, as long as they're U.S. citizens. See, that's another big bugaboo, is they're not U.S. citizens coming across this border. They have no rights, and yet our legal system has given them rights. It's actually criminal what our legal system has done. But, it's the golden rule. Those who have the gold make the rule, right? You understand what I'm saying? So the point of this whole thing is this creep, this McMission creep. That's what I like to call it. Where you're seeing them want to blend the military into civil LEO, law enforcement officers. I'll give you an example. Here in Ohio, there was a flood in Cincinnati. I worked next to a Cincinnati cop with another military policeman to make sure that, I think we're at Over the Rhine at that time, to make sure there wasn't looting and stuff. But he was the one in charge. That is civil control of the military, as it should be in America, even though the governor of the state has the authority to move people for that. It was not federalized. It didn't need to be. And it ended. A worse situation was what you saw happen in New Orleans. When that happened, they federalized shit and nothing got done. Matter of fact, supplies, relief, all that got pushed to the side. Now overseas, it's a whole different story. Outside of CONUS, continental USA. But within the country, you have to think about posse comitatus. You have to think of all the mechanisms, and the dots and the I's have to be crossed. Military policemen, even investigators from 95 series, 31 series, 58 series in the Marine Corps have to understand the who, what, when, where, why, and how, because your opinion needs nothing, no input in it. Nobody cares about your opinion. You state the facts. Remember the old dragnet when the FBI was actually something every American trusted? It doesn't exist now, right? It's actually pretty sad. But it's true. All we need is a who, what, when, where, and why, man. That's all we need. And that's something that you're seeing blurred too in a different way. Like I said, I don't want to get down into the weeds on this, but I definitely thought this was a program. I did another one. If you guys want to go back and look at different things on military policing, I got more into the bailiwick of it. But this is a conversation. I'm listening to the border talk. I'm listening to all these different things. And I'm seeing the bullshit. And the bullshit is basically lawyers. We have a problem, folks. And if we allow the blurring of civil and military police to keep occurring, no one cares, right? You don't care. Maybe I don't care. Actually, I do care. That's why I'm making this little whatever it is, I don't know, podcast. That's why I'm making it, because I actually do give a shit. And I want the American people to understand where the problems are coming from. And they're not coming from the executive at this point. They were a couple years back. Not getting into all that, but there was some major chicanery afoot. It's starting to be outed now, so you'll see. But like I said, this is something that I guess I'm ego stroking myself a bit, because from 17 till the time I was 24, I started out at 17 in the Army. At 20, I went in the Marine Corps. And 24, I got out and went in the Guard and did my college thing. And this divisive thing that they're trying to pit people on, and they're also trying to suck the military into. And it's at the general level, because remember, generals, they have to go to a finishing school where they learn politics. So never disabuse yourself that generals are still rank and file military people. They're not. They become politicians with a lot of benefits that regular military people don't have. So just disabuse yourself of that notion. You'll be better off. Anyways, I think I'm starting to ramble a little bit. But I'm going to play, like I always do for my exit, my intro. My intro this time was It's Game Time by Axion Ghost. He's allowed me to do it. I appreciate him all the time. Axion's a good man. And, of course, my outro, very simple. I love using it because it is fitting. Inside enemy headquarters. And here we go.